To make a product that looks good is great, but to make a product that looks good and lasts is imperative. In 10 years' time, if it gets a little bit scuffed, you go through, you give it a grind on the surface, and it's back to a new product.
When I see pavers, it's usually in the CBD of a city.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of paving which is used really to highlight and lift areas because of the flexibility of what can be delivered and the aesthetic strength of it. There is a lot of council use of pavers, as you say, for highlighting and lifting areas and the beautification.
And I was looking on your website, you've got places like K Road in Auckland and Constellation Drive. Are they New Zealand-made pavers that have been installed up there by your company?
Certainly is. So we're just in the final throes of one of the upgrade projects right now for K Road, where we've supplied approximately 3,000 square metres of the New Zealand-made terrazzo pavers.
Wow. How do you go about designing the built environment for swapping out what's there for your terrazzo pavers?
Really, we look at the mixed design. We look at, there's a couple of components to it. One is the aesthetics of the product to meet and match what the designer is looking for, but obviously the technical properties as well to make sure that, because it is a hard wearing environment, that they're going to match the test of time, I suppose, for what they need to meet up to.
Because there's a few things that are probably to the untrained eye is not something we think about, like the color of it. It's got to last, right? And it's got people's feet on it all day, and rubbish coming out from shops. It's got to be cleaned. How do you make sure that the pavers you're putting in don't have to be replaced in 5 years?
In 2013, we invested in a bit of machinery from one of our main suppliers out of Australia. They exited the paving market, and it's a 7-stage turnstile press. The presses all of our pavers at 200 tonnes. It's one of only 2 in Australasia, but the pressing process that we make our pavers is the main difference. And we actually recently made a full video of the process up in Otaki. At the time, it was a huge go. We had 7 40-foot containers that we wrapped and strapped the whole factory out of Otaki. And the guys we bought it from were one of the biggest terrazzo suppliers in Australia. They did all the Westfields, they did a lot of the commercial properties. As I say, they exited, and their loss was our gain. We packed the factory, strapped it, sent it home, and if you have a look on our site under the capacity stuff, you can see the video, and that's one of the big things when we're talking to architects. To make a product that looks good is great, but to make a product that looks good and lasts is imperative, more especially when you're in these commercial environments, as you say, where people are going to really be taking to it, not intentionally, but it does take a lot of foot traffic. It takes cars overrunning it, takes guys with food and fat, and it's got to look good for the duration.
So you've got this unique piece of equipment. That must have been a huge moment of excitement for Horizon International, because you guys have been around for some time. Was it 30, 40 years in the business? And when did this...
Oh, we'd be coming up on 50 years, to be fair. We are the longest running paving company in New Zealand.
And what was it like when this piece of equipment arrived more recently?
It was huge. It was a groundbreaker, really, for us. It gives, historically around New Zealand, there's a lot of paving that's been made, but guys in back sheds with moulds where you might make 30, 40, 100, might be 150 pavers a day. This particular piece of machinery will do 1,000 pavers on a single shift every day in, day out, and made to the degree of quality that we're talking about.
So what does this mean for the type of buyer? Because I'm thinking that you've got local councils, you've got your specifiers, your architects, your custom build houses. What does this mean for them being able to access a New Zealand made product at such a level of quality and scale?
It really gives a lot of flexibility. I mean, we did some work, it'll be a few years ago now, for Taupo City Council. And the council designed, they wanted a product which had all the properties, it had the aesthetics, but they also wanted to tie together a local component. So what we did was used a lot of the aggregate based out of the Taupo area, brought it down to our factory, put it into this bit of machinery, and returned it back in a finished state. So it really brought together the local environment with a degree of quality and longevity.
I love that. That means you can actually use the stone or the material from that region back into it. So you've got a provenance story local to that region within New Zealand.
Definitely. So we get involved with a lot of aggregate, and we've spent a lot of time sourcing different aggregates from around the country. One of the ones which you see a little bit around Auckland, like the Red McCallum's chip. We use a basalt which comes out of the bottom of the South Island. Around New Zealand, we've got some fantastic aggregates. And these allow us to make some of the most beautiful mixed designs. Right now, one of the things we're really excited about, as well as the products we're offering to New Zealand, we've also started doing export back into Australia.
Wow.
And to some of the islands. It's really amazing. So the guys, as I say, that we're supplying the product over in Australia, being the biggest, doing the best, when they exited the market, left a huge void. So since they've left, we've started talking again to the architects they used to deal with. And a couple of years ago now, we did the Bunurong Memorial, which was 2,500 square metres of, it's actually a cemetery area, and it went all the way through the property. It was external pavers, it was all through the chapels. So it was a lovely mix of internal, external. Right now, we've been providing for the last 6 months samples for the New South Wales Hospital, which it's in the final throes of tender, and we're expecting to come to fruition pretty quickly so that we can again start sending product over there. And that particular product, it's a beautiful looking product, but we've taken a lot of time and a lot of effort sending samples back and forward so they can really get the look that they're after.
That's fantastic that you've been able to not only service the New Zealand market at a different scale with this machine, but also to then export it back to Australia. That opens up a whole lot of new opportunities.
Oh, it really does. I mean, Australia has really been big on the use of concrete terrazzo-based products, and they've realised and utilised, if you look at a lot of the airports through Australia, a lot of the hotels, a lot of the malls, they've realised a lot of the value of these particular range of products is that you can utilise it, you lay it, and in 10 years' time, if it gets a little bit scuffed, you go through, you give it a grind on the surface, and it's back to a new product. So for longevity purposes, it's amazing.
Is that one of the main differences between the imported products? Because I notice here you've also got some products like Stoneview, Natural Stone, and New Brick, which are your imports. When do you recommend New Zealand made, and when do you recommend an import?
Every situation lends itself a little bit differently. Some areas won't lend themselves to terrazzo, and some of them, it might be a heavy traffic area, for example, where it needs something really robust, and it would be something like a small format product, like a clay or like a bit of natural stone. But then we did a job a couple of years ago now in the town centre down in Invercargill, and we used a mixture of products because some of them which were taking high traffic were more suited to these products, but some of the higher aesthetic products, we actually integrated some of the Bonito products into that. So it really comes down to what the intent, what the purpose, and what the aesthetic.
I've actually seen some of your pavers at a winery in Hawke's Bay, at Craigie Range, and I know that place is about details, right? The whole experience and aesthetic has got to be perfect, and it made me think now, knowing that Horizon International is the company behind the pavers, that feeling when you're on that solid ground and then you're surrounded by the vineyard, it's got to be the best. You don't want something that's second best there, because it would take away from everything else that's been put in terms of investment for a particular look and feel.
Definitely, Ryan. I mean, we've done a couple of things up at Craigie Range, and there's nothing really, for us, nothing makes us more proud than going to jobs that have been there for years. And one of the best, the most amazing stories I still talk about, I've got a builder who does some work in Wellington. And he was an amazingly friendly chap, but he always says to me when he see him on the street, he says, don't forget, if you ever want to send someone to my house. And I'm sitting there going, I wouldn't want people necessarily come to my house. Send them round. The pavers I've had down there 8 years, they look as good as the day went down. It's amazing. And that sort of stuff for me, whilst we enjoy the scale of commercial environment and we enjoy the volumes and stuff, but some of our most satisfying jobs that we've done the residential from start to finish. When you see that and you see the excitement, you see the joy on the person's face at the end of the job, and just the happiness that area will bring to people. And you know that for years to come, and it's the sort of thing you run into them in 2 years' time, and they're as happy to see you as the day that you actually did the job because they still look fantastic.
That's a big vote of confidence, particularly in the trade. What are some of the things that if someone's looking to renovate their landscape around their house or build for the first time in a residential environment, what are some of the considerations they should be thinking to ahead of time before they start working with Horizon? What do you have to think about when you're putting pavers down in a home environment?
Like everything, I think, get a plan. The worst that happens is people get to the end of the job and they say, I wish I'd done it this way, or I wish I incorporated this. So sit down, take the whole area and as a whole, make a plan and then action on your plan. And we find sometimes people look at it and they go, I want to do this whole area, but I can't afford to do it all in one go. But starting from the plan, this year I'll do this part because this is how much money I've got. Next year I'll do this part. But the fact that they've actually got that plan allows them to section off the job and get the outcome at the end of the job rather than leaping in, as I say, and I wish I'd done that, or I wish this, or it's really about having a plan, choosing the right products.
It's certainly something with the design and build. I know when they hand over those houses, there's actually very little that's done in the landscape part of it. And paving can be a part to extend the value, because particularly with house prices, if you want to sell at a premium, it's all about the landscape, not necessarily the house.
It really is. I mean, we get a lot of people come and they say to us, is that we have the different clientele. It's like, I'm doing the house up quickly, I want to knock it off. And our range of pavers are generally, they're a mid to high. They're a beautiful looking product. They're not the cheapest product on the market, but they're the sort of thing that I say to people, if you're going to be there for more than 6 months, you'll spend most of your money doing the job under the ground, laying product. The last little bit is the product you're going to put on the top. So if you're going to be there for your lifetime or an extended period and you want to get the value back at the end of the job, spend the last amount of money putting a decent product down.
I like it. And there's plenty of colours to choose from, isn't there, both for the home environment and the commercial environment? Is there any considerations around what to get for different areas?
We do a lot of lighter products, and there's a lot of questions asked because obviously the lighter you make a paver, the more light the area will be. It's really, sometimes people get caught up with thinking about the module size. It's really about looking at the area you're going to do as to choosing the correct colour, the correct module size, which is going to bring the most out of the area. I always tend to lean towards, but I generally lean towards lighter areas because the lighter areas lift rather than a darker paver, which sometimes, if it's in a more confined area, can make the area look a little bit darker. And
certainly the lighter pavers are a little bit cooler on the feet too in the heat of a New Zealand summer.
It's definitely, yes.
How did you get into paving? This is a family business, right?
It is a family business, yeah.
And was there a time where you decided, actually, paving's not for me, and went off and did something else? Or this was always something you wanted to be part of?
I've been involved since I was a young child. My father, I always tell people the funniest. The thing I always used to trip over is when I'd do work in the holidays, my father would say to me, you've got this little job up the hill, piece of cake, take you 5 minutes. And every time he said that, I knew I was in a power of trouble. Growing up in Wellington, there's not too many flat sections. You're either up the hill and round the back or down the stairs and round the back. And the pavers are going down and generally the soil and everything else is coming back out. So I've been involved since day dot, but I did spend a bunch of time over in Australia and over in the UK. A bit of work as a dive instructor over in Australia. And then came back to New Zealand. My father said, we're at a bit of a turning point. He said to me, we're going to have to bring someone else on. I'd really like you to be involved. I'll understand if you don't, but I think for us, growing up in the family business, it gets in your blood. And when you start enjoying the services you look at, I drive my partner crazy. We go on holiday and I spend half my time looking at the footpath. architects look at buildings, we look at pavers, and I must be wearing it on her now, because when we go on holiday now, she starts commenting on footpaths herself. There's no hope for her, but yeah, it really is. It's a passion. If you don't enjoy it, it's not really the job for you. But if you enjoy it, you love looking at good service, and you like the enjoyment that it brings to people, I think that's what it's all about.
That's certainly the continuing theme I found on this podcast, is that just the raw passion in manufacturing to make a good product and then see it in the built environment. I had David Percy on here from Pertronics, and he said when he took his family for a walk through Wellington CBD, not through the forest or the parks, but through the CBD, so he could check off the fire protection panels that had been installed in all the skyscrapers. So he was looking in the windows for those. His daughters were looking in the windows for the fashion, and they'd worked out that worked for all parts of the family.
We're really lucky I've been lucky to be involved in the family business, that we're involved in beautification. So the stuff that we look at is generally the last surface that goes down, but it is the stuff that sets it off, the stuff that adds the beauty. So we do business, and we've done business from Bluff to Kaikoia. So you can drive the length of the country, and probably 90% of small towns that you drive through with the new brick paver, there's really 500,000 square metres of it dotted around New Zealand. So there's not a lot of small towns that we haven't had a touch and had some impact into.
Is there anything that the government should be doing at a central level? Because I know that they're very keen on procuring from New Zealand firms. Is there anything that could help your business along in kind of the big infrastructure projects that have been talked about over the last 6 months since COVID?
I think just the drive to have a look local rather than, and we, again, as you say, we import products as well, but I think there's a lot of New Zealand manufacturers who can do products which are suitable, products which are beautiful, and products that really can lift these sorts of environments without having to look overseas. That's really the key. I mean, being an importing sort of country, we do spend a lot of time looking overseas, and spend a lot of time looking for cheaper, better deals. But I think at this sort of time, we need to be looking internally and looking for things which will satisfy the needs. And it's not really, I don't think, about trying to find a lesser grade outcome. You still need the quality of things like K Road. You don't want to be putting something which, as you say, which you'll be pulling up in 5 years. So it's got to meet the brief. But there are definitely options inside New Zealand that will do that and provide the outcome they're looking for with the strong aesthetic as well.
With the amount of square meterage you're doing, I really like the idea that you're sourcing the ingredients, the components to make those stone paving from New Zealand, so that we're actually paving New Zealand with New Zealand ingredients where it's required, because there's certainly a lot of growth in our cities required to house the people we've got, and we want to make sure that those local areas are looking beautiful, that we've got a good urban design setting. Probably this is kind of a final question, are you noticing a shift between in those areas where for an encouragement of more walkers rather than cars? Is that one of the compelling events where people start thinking about, let's put paving down rather than just road it through with bitumen or asphalt?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a drive towards more walking, or what they call shared space areas, where they're encouraging pedestrians now. The idea of pedestrians to overlap with vehicles as well. The whole push towards the cycleways as well, like Kirangapi Road, if you look at that, as well as the repaved footpath. They're also adding, obviously, the laneways that are there for cyclists and stuff. So yeah, there is really a drive towards getting people out, getting them, I suppose, more mobile, and just trying to get them out of their cars.
Love it. Is there anything I haven't asked you about, Nathan, or an area or a product or the service side of it, of who installs it? Is there anything that you want to cover before we finish up?
The other part, really, I think where we differ, because we've got 45 odd years in the business, we've got a network of guys that run through the length of the country, and we end up dealing a lot with QSs that call us and say, I need to get a price, I need to get an indicative price that's going to be this. So while a lot of companies can tick off the product side, there's not a lot of companies that have got the depth of knowledge, the specification side, and also the networks of installers around the country that will allow us to provide. So I was talking to guys in Invercargill, clay pavers or terrazzo pavers, this is what we want to do. And we can talk to those guys and we can really wrap a pretty tight number around what it's going to cost people, so that as opposed to shooting pie in the sky stuff that doesn't go anywhere, it'll give guys a really good fix as to what the project's going to cost before the start's on.
That's great. So for those in the audience that don't know what the QS is, I believe that is Quantity Surveyor. Is that right? And that's if you get a tight figure up front, you're more likely to go down that route because you're not going to have the cost overruns there. And I guess you can do that because you're actually the manufacturer and the supplier.
Correct. So we know our side of the business. The installers can tell us what they're factually going to charge. So yeah, they're generally real numbers.
Awesome. I like how you're open to doing the residential side, even though you probably don't need that for your business. It's it's great that you're actually encouraging both sides, not just the big contracts, and fantastic for that export work too, back into Australia and putting down the paving for Australia's built environment. Well done. Fantastic work.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Appreciate your time today. Thanks, Nathan. That's a really good chat, and I knew that there was far more to paving than meets the eye, and that's a classic story of walking down the street with your family. I love that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.